I stopped in a town and found everything, except the people. I wasn't supposed to be here. A detour, a missed exit, and my phone's GPS throwing a tantrum had landed me in this little speck of a town. Just a few hours off course, I told myself. Besides, a small-town diner's greasy breakfast sounded more appealing than another gas station sandwich. The sign read, "Welcome to Willowbrook." It had that quaint old-fashioned charm, the kind you'd see in picture books about Americana, white picket fences, red-bricked sidewalks, and charming little shops with hand-painted signs. The problem was, no one was there. Not a single car on the street, no strollers or pedestrians. It was as if the whole town had decided to sleep in late. I parked by a coffee shop called Brew and Biscuits. Its windows were clean, polished even, but inside the lights were off. I pushed open the door, and it chimed with a cheerful jingle that seemed too loud against the town's dead silence. Inside, everything was perfectly intact. Croissants lay arranged under a glass case, a pot of coffee still warm on the counter. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded so small. Nothing but my own echo replied. I wandered through the town, my footsteps sounding too sharp against the deserted sidewalks. The supermarket's automatic doors swished open as I approached. Its shelves were fully stocked, carts lined neatly at the entrance, but no customers, no cashiers. It was like walking through a dollhouse frozen mid-play. Plates of half-eaten food sat on tables at a diner. Cars remained parked with doors left slightly ajar, the keys still in their ignitions. A baseball game paused mid-play in the park, the bat resting abandoned on the ground. I called out a few more times, my voice growing weaker with each attempt. There was no sign of panic or struggle, just absence. I should have left, gotten back in my car and sped away until my tires hit familiar roads. But curiosity had its claws in me, dragging me deeper into this unsettling stillness. I wandered into a house at the end of Harper Street. The door was unlocked, creaking as I pushed it open. Inside, family photos lined the walls, all smiles and summer vacations. The kitchen table was set for dinner, plates of steaming food that hadn't cooled. I reached out to touch a roast potato. It was still warm. How could this be possible? I moved from house to house, shop to shop. Every place was the same. Lived in, but vacant, as if everyone had left in the middle of living. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, I had circled back to my car, but something made me hesitate. A shape in the distance, near the center of town. I squinted and saw it was a phone booth, bright red, sticking out like a clown's nose against the sleepy pastels of Willowbrook storefronts. I hadn't noticed it earlier. When I reached it, the door hung slightly ajar. A low crackling sound seeped from the receiver dangling from its cord. Against all reason, I picked it up. At first, there was nothing but static, and then a voice. "Why are you here?" it whispered. The line went dead. I froze in the phone booth, the receiver still pressed to my ear. The voice on the other end had been a whisper, dry and distant, but unmistakable. My breath hitched. I shoved the phone back onto the hook and stepped out into the empty street. The wind had picked up, sending a loose newspaper skidding along the cracked pavement. The town was still silent, too silent. I turned on my heel and sprinted for my car. It was parked right where I left it, just past the diner, beside an old fire hydrant. I could see it. I could see the damn thing. But when I reached the curb, it was gone. Not stolen, not moved, gone. There weren't even tire tracks, just an empty space, like the car had never been there at all. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with panic. I pressed the screen, ready to call 911. No service. I swallowed hard. Glancing around, the town, stretched out in all directions, rows of lifeless buildings, neon signs flickering without sound, streetlights humming in the growing darkness. It felt wrong, like I was standing in a painting rather than a real place. Think. A landline phone. Perhaps the library? I had passed it earlier, a squat brick building with dust-covered windows. I bolted toward it, yanking on the door. It opened too easily, and I nearly stumbled inside. The air smelled stale, like old books and something else I couldn't name. I couldn't see any phones, but then a thought crossed my mind. There couldn't be Wi-Fi, could there? My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and searched for a network. And before long I saw it. New Wi-Fi network available. We are still here. My stomach lurched. I tried to connect, but my cell would just time out. Every time. A noise caught my attention. A chair slowly creaking, as if someone just stood up. I turned and ran. The town hall was the biggest building in Willowbrook, a white-columned relic from some forgotten decade. I didn't know what I expected to find inside. An old radio, a set of town records that explained what the hell was happening, anything. But when I shoved open the heavy oak doors, I found something worse. A desk with ledger. It sat in the middle of the grand hall, thick with dust, but open to the last page. I stepped forward, drawn to it, my breath coming too fast. My pulse hammered against my skull. It was a list of names, each one crossed out, except for the last, my own. A floorboard creaked behind me. I whirled around, and for the first time, someone was there. A man stood there, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, dark suspenders, a button-up shirt that might have once been white. His face was gaunt, his eyes tired. He spoke calmly, as if reciting something he had said too many times before. One must stay so the others can live. I took a step back. What? His expression was sad. Willowbrook isn't empty. The people, they're still here, but they need someone to hold the door open. Someone to keep the balance. I shook my head. No, that's insane. He gestured to the ledger. We all fought it at first. A clock chimed, midnight, and suddenly, I wasn't alone. The town came alive. Laughter echoed through the streets. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer rang out. The scent of fresh bread filled the air. Voices, dozens of them, hundreds, overlapping in conversation. The town was waking up, stretching, breathing. And then I felt it, a pull. Not physical, not a hand on my shoulder, but something deeper, something inside me. It was dragging me backward toward the desk, toward the chair in front of the ledger. The man's edges blurred, fading. We all fought it at first, he repeated. But someone has to be the keeper. The pull grew stronger. I gritted my teeth. If I stayed, I would fade. I would vanish from the world. My name scrawled, crossed out like all the others. The town would go on, thriving in its illusion of life. But if I ran, what happened to the town? And what would it do to stop me?
The price of perfection, a baby, a secret, and a dangerous deal. So, how's that baby brewing up? Harry asked while pouring everyone a glass of wine. Except me. He's been playing a lot of soccer in there, I'll tell you that, I answered, laughing and placing my hands on the belly. But hopefully, he'll get out soon enough. Harry chuckled, and he and my husband got back to discussing whatever detail was left in the production's calendar. Tanya, Harry's wife, on the other hand, didn't laugh at all. Instead, she stared at me with a blank expression I couldn't quite decipher. They were the ones who had invited us over for dinner to celebrate the deal my husband had signed with Harry's production company. Why is she acting like that, I wondered. But honestly, I wouldn't let her ruin what was one of the happiest moments of our lives. A few months ago, we had been living in a cramped studio downtown with 2 unpaid rents, and now we were having dinner with this big-shot producer for a movie my husband would be writing. Every day, I woke up thanking God we had this before the baby was born. I was 7 months pregnant. If putting up with this woman looking at me like I was a zoo animal was the price for all this, then I'd gladly pay it. But things got weird when I, feeling nauseous, excused myself to go to the bathroom, as I had many times that night. And as I was washing my hands to get back, I heard a knock on the door. "I'm leaving," I called out to whoever was on the other side. When I opened it, it was Tanya. She stood there, glancing over her shoulder as if checking for anyone. "You need to get out," she whispered like she was sharing a secret, "or they'll take your baby." Before I could even ask what, she turned around and walked back to the room where our husbands were. I sat back at the table, uneasy. What did she mean? Did I hear her correctly? Across from me, Tanya focused on the men's conversation, avoiding eye contact, pretending she hadn't just said what she did. Minutes passed in silence between me and her while the men's discussion grew louder as they drank more. "This is really a special moment," Harry said to my husband, in an emotional voice. "I remember when Tanya was pregnant. She was the most beautiful." Harry then awkwardly placed his hand over hers, and she responded with a half-smile. "What happened?" I blurted out, curious after the whole bathroom incident. They exchanged glances, and I saw my husband look away, uncomfortable. Harry opened his mouth to answer, but Tanya spoke first. "I lost it," she said, locking eyes with me before shifting her gaze to her husband. "But I guess it was worth it." Her face was a mix of cynicism and sadness. Harry quickly got up and asked her to help him set the dessert from the kitchen. She followed without protest. Something about all of this set off a strong alarm in my mind. And it got worse when I heard a heated whispering argument erupt between Tanya and Harry in the kitchen. And my husband's reaction was the worst. He sat right beside me, silent, and wore the most guilty, ashamed face I had ever seen in my life. That's when the doorbell rang. Harry came sprinting out of the kitchen to open it. An old, grumpy-looking man stepped in, and I knew who he was because my husband had described him before. It was the movie's director. Harry and my husband treated him like a king, showering him with praise and filling his wine glass, but he remained stone-faced. The only moment of joy I witnessed was when he greeted me and noticed my belly. His lips stretched into a broad grin that sent chills down my spine. "You never told me he was coming," I whispered to my husband. He and the crew were nearby and decided to drop by. "It won't take long." "But I really wanted to leave now," I continued, trying to be polite. "I'm not feeling well." "I promise we'll go right after dessert," he said with a drunken smile. "Everyone talks about Tanya's cheesecake. They say it's incredible. We have to try it." Obviously, dessert was the last thing on my mind now. My anxiety grew as more and more people started coming through that door. The costume designer, the head of makeup, the VFX director, even a few of the actors, they all started showing up one by one. They greeted each other, then turned to look at me, like I was the main star of some twisted movie playing out in this house. Then Tanya came back from the kitchen, carrying a tray of small plates for the crew. I could see in her face she despised them. But mine was brought by Harry himself, who carried the plate carefully, like it was some precious treasure. As he placed it in front of me, I felt every eye in the room shift toward me, and an eerie silence settled. I looked at the cheesecake. It did look good, but I was certain now there was something more in it. I definitely shouldn't eat it. "I'm a bit unwell right now," I said. "Maybe I'll eat it later." "Honey, at least give it a bite," my husband said, while Harry still stood in front of us, waiting. "I'm just not that hungry. Can't we take it home instead?" The tension in the room was suffocating. My husband's demeanor shifted instantly, his expression darkening as he gripped my arm. "Honey, don't be rude," his face a mix of menace and desperation. "Eat the cake. These people are helping us." That answer was proof he knew very well about whatever was going on. I hesitated, staring at the plate for a few seconds, my mind racing. But before I could speak, Tanya placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "She's just having a wave of nausea," she said, her voice calm. I sure remember how bad it felt. "I'll just take her to the bathroom 1 second to freshen up." Harry wasn't happy, but he sighed and nodded. "Fine, but be quick." Tanya helped me up, keeping her grip steady as we walked hand in hand toward the hallway. The moment we were out of sight, she pulled a car key from her pocket and pressed it into my palm. "Take my car," she whispered. "It's parked outside, second on the left." My heart pounded. "What about you?" "They already took everything I had," her eyes welled with tears. "I'll be fine, just go. Now." I followed her into the bathroom, where she locked the door behind us and helped me jump through the window. I ran to the spot she pointed as fast as a 7 months pregnant woman could. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the key, but as soon as the engine roared to life, I floored it. In the rearview mirror, I saw the house shrinking in the distance, while my phone buzzed with calls from my husband.
My girlfriend unalived, but she won't log off. Tonight's kind of a catalyst for this post. I just received another message, and it's worse than any of the others. My girlfriend died on the August 7th, 2012. She was involved in a 3-car collision driving home from work when someone ran a red light. She passed away within minutes on the scene. We had been dating for 5 years at that point. She wasn't big on the idea of marriage. It felt archaic, she said, gave her a weird vibe. But if she had been, I would have married her within 3 months of our relationship. She was vibrant, the kind of girl that would choose dare every time. She was happiest when camping, but a total technophile too. She always smelled like cinnamon. That being said, she wasn't perfect. She always said something along the lines of, "If I cark it first, don't just say good things about me." I've never liked that. If you don't pay me out, you're doing me a disservice. I've got so many flaws, and that's just part of me. So, this is for Em. The music she said she liked and the music she actually liked were very different. Her idea of affection was a side hug. She had really long toes like a chimpanzee. I know that's tangential, but I don't feel right discussing her without you having an idea of what she was like. On to the meat. Em had been dead for approaching 13 months when she first messaged me. September 4th, 2013. This is when it began. I had left Emily's Facebook account activated so I could send her the occasional message, post on her wall, go through her albums. It felt too final and too un-Emily to memorialize it. I share access with her mother, Susan, meaning her mother has her login and password and has spent a total of approximately 3 minutes on the website, or on a computer, total. After a little confusion, I assumed it was her. November 16th, 2013. I had received confirmation from Susan that she hadn't logged into M's Facebook since the week of her death. M knew a lot of people, so I instantly assumed this was one of her more tech-savvy friends messing with me in the worst possible way. I noticed pretty much immediately that whoever was chatting with me was recycling old messages from Emily and my shared chat history. Though the wheels on the bus comment was from when we were discussing songs to play on a road trip that never eventuated. Hello happened a million times. Around February 2014, Emily started tagging herself in my photos. I would get notifications for them, but the tag would generally always be removed by the time I got to it. The first time I actually caught one, it felt like someone had punched me in the gut. She would tag herself in spaces where it was plausible for her to be or where she would usually hang out. I've got screenshots of two, from April and June. These are the only ones I've caught, so they're a little out of the timeline I'm trying to write out. Around this period of time, I stopped being able to sleep. I was too angry to sleep. She would tag herself in random photos every couple of weeks. The friends who noticed and said something thought it was a messed up bug. I found out recently that there have been friends who have noticed and didn't say anything. Some of them have removed me from their Facebook friends list. At this point, some of you may be wondering why I didn't just delete my Facebook profile. I wish I had. I did for a little while. On days when I can't get out there, though, it's nice having my friends available to chat. It's nice visiting M's page when the little green circle isn't next to her name. I was already socially reclusive when M was alive. Her death turned me into something pretty close to a hermit, and Facebook and MMOs are my only real social outlets. On March 15th, I sent what I assumed was M's hacker a message. On March 25th, I received an answer. It wasn't until I was going over these logs a few months later that I noticed she was recycling my own words as well. My response seems kind of lackluster here. I was intentionally providing him, or with emotional bait. This is actually devastating, to keep them interested in their game. I was working off the assumption that the kind of person to do this would be the kind of person that would thrive on the distress of others. I was posting in tech forums, looking for ways to track this person, contacting Facebook. I needed to keep them around so I could gather evidence. Before anyone asks, yes, I had changed the password and all security info countless times. 16th of April. I received this. This seems like word salad. Like all our conversations so far, it's recycled from previous messages she sent. 29th of April. I hadn't discovered any leads. Facebook had told me the locations her page had been accessed from, but since her death, they're all places I can account for. My home, my work, her mom's house, etc. My response here wasn't bait. Yo ass Nathan was an in-joke too lame worth explaining, but seeing her say it again just absolutely crippled me. My reaction in real life was much less prettier. I'm not expecting my bond back. Her last few messages had started to scare me, but I wouldn't admit it at this point. 8th of May. I don't really have the words for this. Freezing is the first original word she's made. This has given me nightmares that have only started to kick in recently. I keep dreaming that she's in an ice-cold car, frozen blue and gray, and I'm standing outside in the warmth screaming at her to open the door. She doesn't even realize I'm there. Sometimes her legs are outside with me. 24th of May. I wasn't actually drunk. She wasn't an affectionate girl, and it always embarrassed her to exchange I love yous, cuddle, talk about how much we meant to each other. She was more comfortable with it when I was boozed up. I got fake drunk a lot. Her reply is what prompted me to finally memorialize her page, thinking it might help curb this behavior. It might seem innocuous compared to her previous message. It's pasted from an old conversation where I was trying to convince her to let me drive her home from a friend's. In the collision, the dashboard had crushed her. She was severed in a diagonal line from her right hip to midway down her left thigh. One of her legs was found tucked under the back seat. Going back in time. August 7th, 2012. These are logs from the day she died. She was usually home from work by 4:30 p.m. This, alongside a couple of voicemail messages, is the last time I talked to her under the assumption that she was alive. You'll see why I'm showing you these soon. Yesterday, July 1st, 2014, I memorialized her page a couple of days after I received the message about walking. Until today, she'd been quiet. She wasn't even tagging herself in my photos. I don't know what to do anymore. Do I kill her memorial page? What if it is her? I want to puke. I don't know what's happening. I just heard a Facebook alert. I'm too afraid to swap windows and check it.